Hey there guys, this is Louis. I have a bunch of content that I need to get up and these adverts are kind of standing in the way. So for now, I want to tell you about the sponsors to this video. First up is Pepsi Cola. That's right, the drink of a new generation. I don't remember the fucking slogan, but what I can tell you about is long ago, when I was a child, I had the best teeth in the game. That's right, my teeth were impeccable. I could take on Anthony Fantano any day of the week, but I gotta tell you that that's just not the case anymore. As the years dragged on, I went to the dentist time and again to have cavities filled. And is that the fault of my parents? No. Is that the fault of my diet? In kind, yes. But you know who is at fault for my terrible teeth, for my cavity-filled teeth? Pepsi. Pepsi did it to me. As you would call it, soda pop, but I know it as just pop. It did it to me. It took away the sparkle in my eye and the gleam in my smile. This beverage took it all away from me, and I can never get it back. Do you understand that what I'm telling you right now? As it relates to this soft drink, I could never get back what it took from me. Besides that, you can also find some groovy shit on J-List. All kinds of kink shit if you're into weeb kink. If you're not, then why don't you head on over to Play Asia and pick yourself up an actual decent game. Maybe pick up the Goldie but Oldie, Dead or Alive Extreme 3. You could pick that up or not, it doesn't even matter at this point. But head on over to J-List or Play Asia. But whatever you do, don't buy Pepsi, because it will ruin you. It will take every joy away from you in life. It will leave you a husk of a man or woman. The links for everything mentioned except for Pepsi can be found in the description.
So this is Louis, and my hope is that I can use what time I have remaining on this Saturday morning. Surveillance is now the afternoon, early afternoon. Haven't enjoyed my day so far. I would have slept in and had some time to work on the multiple reports that I have due. I'm going to spend most of the rest of this fucking afternoon working on these reports once I'm back. For now, I wanted to talk about a topic that is continuously brought up by the quote-unquote left, but by mostly progressives, and maybe someday I'll have the time to finish the video I wanted to do on my proposals instead of what the Justice Democrats were proposing. I was going to offer my proposals for what I think an actual platform should be. There's no promises there at all, period. But for now, I wanted to talk about the issue of the undue influence on our government and our politicians by military corporations or defense contracting corporations or private military contractor corporations. These corporations, at their bedrock, are almost all public, to my knowledge, and so their interests are serving their shareholders and that of their board. Their interest is not to serve the American people or to serve the American interest outside of what the government can do for them as a corporation and for, executives or shareholders within a corporation. I cannot stand military corporations, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, all these different corporations. I consider the people there to be some of the least patriotic people in the country, despite the notions of the business class and the capitalist class and how they're the most patriotic, because they're hardworking and whatever. I don't doubt that many of these people are hardworking, but they're hardworking in the sense that their interest is their own interest. It's not the American interest. And I think that as it relates to the military and as it relates to national security and as it relates to our interest globally, which is American hegemony, our interest should be the public interest. It should be the state interest. It should not be the interest of the business class or the capitalist class or the shareholders. Their interest should be about last in that regard. As it relates to, whatever, video games, sure, give the EA shareholders their dividend. As it relates to whatever else, movies, bullshit that doesn't matter. I have no problem with capitalism. I have no problem with people making their end an investment. Okay, they're making an investment. They're getting a share of what is made in profit. That's fine. I have no problem with capitalism. But in America, we have a massive problem, and it may be the biggest problem in America, and that is the influence that these corporations have over our politicians and over the deep state, meaning, the different agencies, the Pentagon, the rest of that. They have an enormous amount of influence over that portion of the government, including the politicians who should be our representatives, but, they don't represent us. They represent their interests. They represent the interests of these corporations to their end, to the interests of the politician and to the interests of the corporation, not to the interests of the American people. That isn't to say that the products that these corporations are providing are necessarily all faulty or fraudulent or shit or whatever. They may be delivering a quality product, and I'm certain that many of these corporations are delivering a quality product. But the issue is whether we necessarily need that product, whether there's any efficacy behind that product and buying it, and whether that money is actually being transparently used, whether it's being spent on things that we don't necessarily need or spent in a murky way to just be spent. There's no other purpose other than to spend taxpayer dollars for the interest of those corporations, and then the politicians or whomever are deciding the matter of what's being spent are receiving kickbacks on their behalf or receiving gifts or what have you. In my opinion, this is the greatest problem that we have in this country, and it is because we are the hegemon of the world. You saw this in just about every other major power, including England, the English Empire. They had the exact same problem, and it's what every empire ultimately has as a problem, which is the military and how much is being spent and how it's being used, and people getting rich off of that fact. And that's the problem we have today in the United States. And I think that if we don't actually address it at some point in a real way where there's real reform and there's real transparency brought to these institutions, and I mean mostly the Pentagon and these agencies and how they're spending this money, if there's no transparency brought and there's no reform that's actually had, you're going to see some kind of cataclysmic event happen, because we can't continue to spend in the way that we're spending on these different programs and from these different institutions within the government. We can't continue spending the way we are, and we continue to spend, and Trump is no different. I'm sorry, Trump supporters. Trump has been cucked by the deep state. It's extremely disappointing to see another president cuck to these corporations and to these powers and just throw more money at a problem in which the problem is just loose spending of money, where there's no transparency, there's no accountability at all. And the Pentagon is not in any way, they don't see any need to reform themselves. They see no need to reform at all. These companies are making just an insane amount of profit off of taxpayer money. This is just the purest form of corporatism, where you have public money just being spent like it's nothing towards programs that we could need or may need or could be completely efficacious. We could absolutely need some of the things that we're buying with this money, but it's so fucking murky. There's such a lack of transparency. Unfortunately, it seems to me that the average person has no notion of this. They don't understand this. They don't understand the money that's being, spent. They don't understand the treaties that we have with these other countries. They don't understand the joint operations that we have with different countries, like in Japan and Germany especially. They don't understand that. They don't understand the importance of NATO. And unfortunately, with both sides, with Republicans, I've never really seen any kind of actual explanation of our military presence in the world that's in any way detailed. I'm sure that there are Republicans that are very much intelligent on the matter, but I've never really seen any kind of clear explanation by Republicans on the matter at all. To be honest, you have to acknowledge the problem that exists now, where we are spending money like there's no tomorrow, and it's being spent on things that that there's no accountability for. We have no idea where it's being spent. The Pentagon has no idea where it's being spent, and they don't really seem to care about that fact. I expect some kind of acknowledgement of that, because it is very much a problem. And why I mention this and why I am, putting the onus on Republicans is due to the fact that Democrats are lost, in my opinion, on the military. Not every Democrat, but many Democrats. It seems to me that you have Democrats like Howard Dean and others that are globalists, and they don't really seem to care all that much about, any idea of American hegemony. They seem to envy the EU of all things, which actually undermines American hegemony. It's very weird, and I'm not wrong. I know I'm not wrong on this. I've seen Howard Dean virtue signal about Brexit and that sort of thing, and he wants the EU to be successful in that, and it's a matter of like, well, why? That actually, stands in the way of our influence as it relates to, our dollar in the world, and the, a competing dollar and a competing market and a competing military presence as it relates to NATO, which we have an enormous amount of influence with. You should be opposed to the EU if you are actually in any way in favor of American hegemony. But you have many Democrats that actually desire things like the EU. And actually do like the EU literally, as an entity. And that isn't to say that, if the EU is at all functional and not authoritarian and crazy, I wouldn't necessarily, I wouldn't be opposed to it myself, despite my opinions on, the American interests throughout the world. It's not as though that I resent any kind of government that is in any way serving the interests of its own people. I'm not against that kind of thing. But the EU should be easy to oppose because it's not actually reflective at all of its constituency or what it pretends to be its constituency. It's just kind of this elite organization that doesn't represent any interests other than crazy globalist utopian types, in my opinion, based on what I've seen. The biggest problem the EU has is actually representing the interests of anybody. And that's why I think it's kind of just an illegitimate organization. It pretends to be something that it's not, and for that reason, and the fact that it has no efficacy as an organization, I think there's no real reason to retain it. I agree with, Sargon and many others that think that best that if it fails. And I agree with that just based on the fact that from what I've seen of the EU, it doesn't really serve any kind of real purpose. And what it purports to serve is a lie. It doesn't really do that. But getting back to the topic at hand here, you have the globalist Democrats, which are the establishment Democrats, and then you have the progressives, who are purely utopian. And what motivated me to do this video was a video by Jimmy Dore, where he talks about this matter, and he's half right. And that's the problem, where he can recognize the influence of these corporations and these contractors over our politicians and over the government itself, and how this is a major concern. And I agree, it's in my opinion one of the greatest concerns, if not the greatest concern, because it completely undermines our position in the world. It undermines the fact that we are the hegemon in this world, and if it isn't us, okay, it's China. I have yet to hear anyone actually contradict that. I've yet to hear a single fucking person ever contradict me on that. That if it isn't us, it's going to be China. And you have to recall that, if it was us or England, it'd be another fucking story. But this is the United States, which is liberal loony on most things. We have our problems, but, we are very, very liberal. And then you have China, which is a totalitarian government that is basically communist on a good day, when it's not just a pure fucking horrific oligarchy. China's one of the worst possible nations to be the hegemon of the world, and that's who's competing with us for hegemony. So bear that in mind, okay? That's the important part here, that if it isn't us, it's fucking China, and that's a fucking huge problem. I'd rather it be us, and if you're sane, you'd probably have the United States there, taking the fucking flack of the world, the animus of the world, rather than, just allowing China to rise up and start becoming extreme. And they're not going to get any less authoritarian if they're the hegemon. Okay, they're not. They're going to get worse, and they are already very fucking bad and authoritarian. I don't mind the atheism, but enforced atheism, okay, that's kind of a scary fucking proposition, because the reason why communists are atheists and why they enforce atheism is because religious dogma is a competing dogma to their own, and that's why they want to have it annihilated. Communism and totalitarian ideology is very scary in our kind of world. So you should be opposed to China having power. And that's why I would disagree with someone like probably Bernie Sanders or Jimmy Dore or your average progressive Kyle Kulinski. I know that I very much disagree with him on this. We don't agree because they actually can't understand the problem accurately. They're half right in that, the military-industrial complex is a thing. It absolutely is. And like I said, that's one of the greatest, if not the greatest, issue we have in the United States right now. But at the same time, they're completely wrong in that they think they can just eliminate the budget that we have in relation to the military. They think we can just start closing fucking bases and it would have no effect in the world because they don't actually understand that every nation in the world, every single one, is competing for greater influence within their region of the world. They want more influence. Every single one. It doesn't matter whether it's Canada or if it's the UK or if it's France or if it's Germany or if it's Russia or if it's any fucking country in the world, okay? Fucking Somalia. It doesn't matter. Every single nation in the world wants to have greater influence over their region. They want to have, if it's Japan, they want to have influence over, the territory that they still claim. They want to have influence over their oceans or the seas in their, direct area. They want to have influence. They want to have greater influence over the territory that they control, and they want to control more territory. That is the natural state of any state, is to want to have more territory and is to want to control that territory even greater than they already do now. If the United States releases its grip on the world, if we withdraw from the world, in the sense of, and I don't mean this from you'll hear this from corporatists because they're afraid that the money train is going to stop, that there's actually going to be reform, that there's actually going to be transparency. That's what they fear. The corporatists fear that because their interest is not the American interest, it's their own interest. They're looking for their own end. And unfortunately, this is the tightrope to walk, in that you are on the cusp of going into the argument of American exceptionalism, which I don't believe in. I don't believe in that notion of, well, America is so exceptional that we should be the hegemon of the world. I believe that of all the powers in the world and all the cultures and all the societies of the world, we should be. But in the notion of America being the only one, the exclusive nation, I don't believe that. But being that we are the hegemon of the world, my opinion is that we have no other choice other than to be the hegemon of the world. We did not enter into this obligation willingly. We were forced into this by the fucking Soviet Union. We were forced into competing for global hegemony by the Soviet Union, period. They were competing for it, and we were the only nation that was in a position to compete with them. And so we did compete with them, and we won. And so now there is only one hegemonic power in the world, and it is us. To withdraw from that position is not a tenable position. It is not an option. We have no other choice other than to be the hegemonic power in the world, to be the hegemon. We have no choice but to be that. And it is because the only other competing power is China. Okay, and there are smaller ones, like Saudi Arabia is one of them. That's another fucking great option. Russia, which, I don't even want to talk about because of all the fucking bullshit that's going now, but Russia is not a great nation to be, to have hegemonic power. They're really not. Even in their current form, they're really not. They seem to be kind of a really regressive authoritarian, not just a government, but kind of a society. They've always kind of been, they've always kind of had as a country, and I don't mean to, sound racist or anything like that, or, chauvinist or whatever, but Russians have always been kind of autocratic. They have autocratic tendencies. They have authoritarian tendencies. They have tendencies towards collectivism. Of all the nations in the world to consider for, hegemonic power, Russia is not a good one. They're obviously not like an, shithole nation like other nations, like Saudi Arabia. That would be one where definitely you don't want to have hegemonic power. But Russia's not a good option. Again, if this was England, if this was the United States, if this was, the slew of nations, even France, despite its authoritarian tendencies and collectivism, if this was a slew of these different liberal nations that we can choose from to have hegemonic power, maybe we could talk about this. And maybe that's where we can say the notion of American exceptionalism is totally bogus, completely and utterly. But the issue is that those nations aren't competing for global hegemony. They're not actually competing. It's just the United States. It's just fucking China, okay? We have one or the other. And if China achieves hegemony in this fucking world, one, you'll have wars. Guaranteed. You think that, you know, they're just going to sit on their ass and not go after Korea? They're not going to go after Japan? They're not going to go after Taiwan? They're not going to go after Vietnam? They're not going to go after Indonesia? They're not going to go after all this fucking territory that's around them? They're not going to do it? Bull fucking shit. They will do it. They will go to war. You'll see generals within their country start calling each other cucks, start fucking trying to outmasculine the other generals, and the general who's the most fucking flamboyant, the most fucking war hawkish, they'll rise to power, and it'll be under the fucking notion of, oh, a new fucking, you know, Chinese empire, some bullshit, and they'll go to war, they'll attack one of our allies, and then you'll have a fucking world war. So, no thanks. No thanks. I don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see a world where the Chinese achieve something close to hegemonic power, because it will be a bloody, totalitarian fucking world. It will not be a good world to live in. We will regress back into the fucking 19th and 20th century, where you'll just have fucking war constantly. It will not be a good thing. And so, my opinion is that the only option we have is the United States. And with that, I am out of time. Thanks for listening.